Classical human resources management. Hi, I'm Joseph Rubens. I'm a professor of organizational behavior at the NHTV Breda University, especially for its academies of hotel, facility management, and also leisure, I guess, yeah. And here is a class that I designed for second year sophomore university students. And I will talk about classical human resources management, because some of you probably already know from my other clips and lectures that I also talk a lot about modern or new forms of HRM, but let's also talk a bit about the classics. Now, what is HRM? And well, here's a fancy definition by Bax, which is, it's managing processes in an organization with the goal to match the supply and demand of labor in order to accomplish the desired production levels, right? Or much more simply put the right woman in the right place to get the right result. And maybe some of you hear something. This is just the wind. You know, it's we had some very sunny days in the Netherlands, but now we have a bit of wind and storm. Now, here's again the classical employment cycle. And just have a look. It starts with, you know, there's an ad in the newspaper, or to be more modern, there's an ad on LinkedIn, or you go to a cocktail party and somebody says, hey, we are recruiting. And you send your CV or you send your movie clip, and then somebody invites you over. Traditionally, that can be send a CV, an HR person invites you over and has a talk with you. This person may also ask you to fill out some tests, intelligence and personality tests. Or if you are in a non-traditional company like Zappos, for example, you get interviewed by many different people during a barbecue, a marathon, skinny dipping, whatever you do. But that's their way of recruitment and selection. Then you're hired. And if it's a bit of a, you know, decent company, you get something called induction. People show you, tell you, train you what's appropriate here. Especially with chain hotels like Hilton, Marriott, Radisson, etc. You know, they tell you how to wear the uniform, what are the corporate values. You know, when you're at Zappos, you spend 4 weeks at a boot camp about the values. But not every company does this. Then you have training. And training can be ongoing. It can be how to use the Excel program, how to have telephone skills, anything that needs training. And standard HR has performance appraisal. At least once a year, better every 3 to 6 months, where your boss tells you you're doing well on these accounts and you're not doing well on these other accounts. And then reward. Reward can simply be your salary. It can include a bonus. It can include membership cards to golf clubs. That's what HR also does. Then there's some disciplining. Well, if you come to work drunk, that may be a reason for HR to fire you, for example, or if you are violent or other inappropriate behavior. Another thing of good HR policies is career planning. Well, I shouldn't say good, just what some people do, is namely telling, well, you start here and you can move up to become an assistant manager, and then you're a manager, and then you can become a vice president, whatever. They tell you what perspectives are in the company, which of course is related to promotion. You've been 4 years with us, you've passed exams, you've shown great results, you move up. And then also classical employment cycle can be termination. And I always ask my students, how many of you think that you will ever get terminated in your life? And students are getting smarter, so about half the class raises their hand, and they're right, because most of us will be terminated sometime, not necessarily because we're not skilled, but because of economic situations and things that happen outside of us. But it's something to, take into consideration. And then the whole thing starts again. The classical, typical employment cycle. And here it's explained a little bit more fully. I'm not going to go over all of them, but it basically says, for example, when you recruit, select, and induce people, it's really to find out, is he or she the right person for the job? Because employee turnover is very expensive. In the hotel industry, 60 to 300% of people leave the industry within a year, which means you have to find other people, and all of this costs money, about 70% of an annual salary of somebody. So Zappos, for example, takes tremendous care in this first step, and they even offer $3,000 after a month of induction to tell you, please, please, please leave our company if this is not 100% for you, and take the money. But if it is for you, you are committed to maybe stay on for the rest of your life. So that's also back, staying somewhere for the rest of your life. And then you have all these other different departments. Just a small one, I don't know how to use a pointer, but HSE has to do with health and safety. So that's also something that we check at hotel. The bath model of HRM. Now, for those of you who don't know Bath, it's not a bath, but Bath is a city in the United Kingdom, and that's where the model was created. And the idea is, how do HR processes and policies, how do they influence an employee's behavior and performance? Well, for that, I like to use the three-factor theory, quite inspired by Frederick Herzberg's theory. And it basically says performance has to do with three things: ability, motivation, and opportunity. And this is logical, but again, people often forget the most logical things. Ability. Can she do the job? Does she or he have the knowledge and the skills to do this? If not, they won't be able to perform. The second one is motivation. Do you want to do this? I mean, it's one thing being able to sell machine guns. It's another thing to actually want to go out and sell machine guns. This may not be your thing. And then the last one is, of course, opportunity. Am I able to use my skills? Let's say you work for a company that needed someone who's fluent in Japanese. And you speak Japanese very well, and you work with a Japanese customer for a while, and then suddenly no more Japanese customers, and you don't have the opportunity anymore to show what you're good at, to do your Japanese thing. So yes, you're able, yes, you're motivated, but you don't have the chance to do it. Of course, that's when performance drops, and when you need to do something else. That's also why you should warn companies against training people into skills that may be wonderful. Like, for example, you send someone on a leadership course, but if afterwards they're not allowed, they are not given the opportunity to physically and actually lead a bunch of people, they will after a while feel frustrated because they can do something, but they just don't have the chance to show their skill. Now, that was quick. So now the process theory of HRM, and this is basically the different processes you could find again in a classical HRM company. And there are some stepping stones, that 4 of them, that really connect. So the basis is you need those HR policies that work on ability, motivation, and opportunity. Secondly, your line managers have to live those policies. They have to be people that you trust, that you respect, and that encourage you to go and do all those amazing things. The third one, it sounds logical, but sometimes it's ignored. Management behavior has to be in line with those policies. Very simply put, if one of my HR values is punctuality, well then as a manager, I better be on time for meetings myself. If one of the corporate values is being extremely hospitable to people, then I as a manager, let's say I'm a manager of a hospital, if I see someone walking around the hospital looking for something, I need to go up to this person and say, you know, sir, ma'am, can I help you? It's not up to, you have to live the values. When that happens, automatically, or there's a bigger chance that people will be satisfied and definitely committed. And then discretionary behavior of staff, which basically means that have faith in your people. Your people are doing the job because they want to do that particular job, and they'll be smart and efficient enough to do it as well as they can. So those 4 are stepping stones for the different HRM processes. And the process theory has 11 processes. Now, you may remember from the employment cycle, some of them we already discussed, like recruitment and selection. But there's also other ones, for example, the last one on work-life balance. That's especially a typical one the last 10 years, where we notice a lot of people are getting seriously ill due to stress and not being able to balance both. So that's also one of the functions of HRM. And let us go to a practical, or to 2 practical examples. One is the company ISS. And I'm not going to read all of them, but as you notice, they are serious about classical human resources management policies. So they have a policy for recruitment, for employee appraisals and reviews, etc. So classical approach. And this is because they have specific leadership principles. For example, putting customers first, having passion about performance. So those are all examples of what is important for a company and how those are put in processes of HRM. Here's an example of Hilton, where the company says our team members, what do? Well, they believe that those opportunities we extend to our team members create an environment that is both challenging and fun, and will in turn create unique and enriching experiences for each and every guest. So specific values that are lived in the HRM policies. And you can answer those questions yourself. Here's another one. Here you see how, again, Hilton has a university, the Hilton Worldwide University, where it offers all sorts of trainings so that it can specifically develop its people. Again, you have this question, where does it fit? And then here, the Hilton Career Progression Plan, or they call it the elevator, and it's very interesting because it basically says you start as a team member, and when you have shown performance there, then your manager may invite you and say, I think you are ready for the Leadership 1 training. If you've successfully achieved that training, you then become a team leader. Again, some time is spent in that role, and then you're ready for Leadership 2, and so it goes until eventually you become general manager. So, probably quite simple, but you can, again, check where does that fit in standard HRM process theory. There is a diversity movie. Now I know for those watching you cannot click, so you'll have to be in my class, or there's the web link over there that you can find. Now, that's the end of my classical HRM lecture. And first message for my students, remember there are also modern ways of HRM. We will be reading several articles on the millennial generation and discuss, do we do same HR with them or a different kind of HR? You will read an article on the Darwinian workplace, where specific restaurants in New York are using competitive systems to naturally let people drop out that don't perform well. And then, of course, there's the article on Brazilian management guru Ricardo Semler, who doesn't want to take charge, so we'll read about Semco. And also I have an interview with Ricardo where he explains how he runs his Botanique Hotel and Spa, and there's also specific clips on that. Then corporate democracy, participant management, we spend lots of time there because I really think that's the basic organizational form for the 21st century and beyond. And then there's an example of how Zappos, Zappos.com, went from semi-classical to a TEAL participative management organization. There's a whole series on leadership, Tango. It's a different kind of doing HRM. And then, of course, organize with chaos. How can you live with complexity and new ways of HRM? And I just want to show you a slide. I'm always very proud of showing my colleagues. Also, you know, they're better looking than me, so I prefer to show them at the end. But they're also your tutors. So if you have questions, dear students, come and find us and we will guide you on HRM and other OB related things. Thank you.